Welcome you from beautiful downtown Miami, hot Miami. It's one of those things we're going through different transitions. Excited to be here. I'm showing up as an investor for the last 30 years, consulting as many years, coaching for 15 years. I created a mentoring program 5 years ago and currently have $1 million business challenge ongoing, which I'm really thrilled about that. And the question, I'm starting to think that it's a higher level of flow. And they talked a little bit about flow, but I'm finding out that all these discussions, all of these books, all of these speakers are leading through one path. Now, could that be true? I mean, there's so many different things. And so I go back to, well, what is important? And of course, the client is important. And the foundation for a client is physiology, the physiology and how they interpret the world, how they manage the world through their physiology. And we as human beings are rewarded depending on the situation by endorphins, serotonin, and that's at the physiological level. So anything that leads to that, with good or bad results, we get sparked by those feel good things. Everything seems to start with the physical person, the physiology, and then internalizing it. The physiology is impacted by serotonin, endorphins, cortisol, which gives you stress, or DHEA, which gives you positive feelings. So all of a sudden, we're starting at a physical level that I'm not a medical person, but I'm thinking, what does that mean? Why don't I just go for all DHEA, all the positive things? Why do I just ignore cortisol and all those things? But all of a sudden, I'm starting to think, oh, they're all appropriate depending on the situation. I do need to feel stress in particular situations. I do need to feel a pump of excitement in certain situations, not all the time. So now I'm thinking it's physiological. Then, and I got this from one of the speakers that I was listening to, and he put physiology at the top. The second one was feeling. The third one was emotions. The fourth, he went on through a list of that. And so that gave me an interesting perspective in terms of human beings, how we respond. And if we all start to think with that kind of framework, that kind of model, if you will, then things start to get a lot clearer. All of these things that we went through, I could follow it because I could say, oh, okay, that tags to that tags to that. And I could follow it because I had a framework. And the framework is this. The framework is simply this, that at the highest level of humans, we strive and look for a high level of flow. Now, what does that mean? Well, what I'm starting to understand is super athletes, people that I reach high level of performance, have a high level of flow, and they have a systematic way of getting there. Let's look at the opposite way. And I thought, well, what is the opposite of flow? The opposite of flow is flight or fight. Those things that we get from our human being as we're in a fight situation or a flight situation or a freeze situation. That's innate in us. And I thought, oh, well, clients know how to handle that already without us. What they bring us coaches in is to get out of that state into something that gets better results. And those better results, I was trained and coached that it's focus, give them better results, focus on outcomes, focus on improving productivity, more revenue, more clients, more things. Then what I found out is that there's a higher level than focus. Now, that is flow. Focus is part of flow, so that becomes a piece. So how do we get to flow? And it's that continuous strive for us as human beings to get to that level where we're impacted by those feel-good things, those things that really are endorphins. So I'm finding out in reading books and studying about high performance athletes. I'm an athlete, but I'm certainly not a high performance. But I've been in some flow situations that I go, oh, okay, I know that situation, so I can relate to that. It doesn't happen often, but now I want to get to that in different stages of my life. What if I could be in a flow state as a coach or a consultant or an investor or wherever I show up, and if I could turn it on or turn it off? So those are the things that I call this particular thing time under tension. We all have time under tension. And it starts with a fight, flight, freeze, focus, and flow. And I think the objective for us and what they're talking about through positive psychology, they're naming it different things, but all of those discussions, all of those things lead to bringing a client to a high level of flow. And as a coach, like Nell said, to show up in a high level of flow. How interesting would that be? That I'm discovering is that clients are looking for results, i.e. focus. They want to be focused, and that's to Diane's point. Diana's point is that they want to achieve something. They want to get to that is focus. And what I'm starting to understand is what they really, there's a want and what they need. What they want is focus. What they really need is flow, and they don't know how to get there. And we as coaches have the obligation not only to learn what it is, but also have the triggers and the signals to be able to consistently tap into that flow state. Because once that flow state is only a very short amount of time, because you get there and then you got to rest, and there's a recovery period, and there's stages of flow. Getting back to frameworks, Diane, there's a stages of being in the presence, number one, number two, to be in a learning mode, number three, to be in a creative mode, and finally you may tap into focus or flow rather. And flow comes in different flavors. I'm finding out that yes, mastery is one of those paths to flow. But if you get to mastery, you're not at the flow state. You could be a real good archer and hit the bullseye most of the time, but flow encompasses a lot of different triggers. And what I've started to do is to collect what I call signals to get to flow. So it's not one signal, mastery or communications or being able to be in meditation. Or I'm starting to find that there's an individual signal to get the flow, and there's a collective signals, a we part to get the flow. And then what I'm pursuing, because we look at the individual, we look at the teams, and then we look at the organization. For those of you that are working with organizations, so organizations are comprised with different teams, different we flows. And what I'm finding out, this is evidence-based from what I understand from other people, those people that can individually tap into that flow state achieve high performance levels. Those extreme athletes. And like I said, I'm not at that level. I'm pursuing that. And I'm thinking, I'd love to be able to be in a flow state as a coach and getting to that. And I'm finding out as a team from working with one of my clients that by coaching her, she was able to disseminate some of the skills, the signals to her team to get to a higher level. And now the organization's paying attention to that. And I'm thinking, well, if that's the case, can they copy some of those signals to flow state in the organization and rise the whole organization? So I'm in that path, and I'm thinking that might be the path to elevating an entire organization, i.e. the Apples, the Googles, all those people. Google certainly is famous for having Google X, getting 10 times return, giving 25% of people's or 20% of an employee's time for creativity. That's part of the signal to flow. So I'm starting to track this. It's not just one thing. It's how many of these can you do and to get to that level. So it's a very interesting journey, which is one of my things that I started to figure out. What is the model for this? Can I do this? But I started to collect these signals, these triggers, and understanding that there's an individual, a we component, a team component, and possibly from there's an organizational. But it starts also with physiology. The person that is in rested, energetic, gets enough sleep, that person has a real good chance of being in a flow state, even getting their focus state. Somebody that's on drugs, doesn't sleep, is stressed out, they are not performing well. And you got to take care of that physiology first before they can go to the next step. A high level of mastery. Then what's interesting is selflessness happens. Selflessness is doing away with that critical thinking that apparently, I don't know it for sure personally, but it goes away. So that there's no critic or judgment. It's a mastery, number one. Number two, there's a sense of timelessness. Time doesn't exist. It just goes away. You're just in that flow. And the third thing is effortless. It's easy. I mean, if you've ever seen a master, somebody that knows what they're doing, they just do it. Musicians are great for that. I am in awe with musicians. I'll look at somebody and they just play something. I'm not a musician. I want to be a musician, but I appreciate music. But when they play, it is mastery. And we as society pay a lot of money to see. When do we as coaches get into a flow state? A flow state, our definition of flow, whatever your definition is, before you meet a client, and elevate that client just by your presence, your questions, your demeanor, your poise, whatever those things are, maybe your models, elevate that client, not just from focus to actual flow. And I think that's the magic. The client is asking us for focus. I have been coached to coach focus when in essence the client is looking to be a mastery of a flow state. And that's one of the things that I'm starting to understand. Oh, what are the signals? What are the triggers? And I can collect the things, the notes that we had today from the session and go, oh, well, that's another trigger, another signal to flow. So it's a really interesting orchestra depending on how you use it with the client. So I'm in a very interesting journey, and I thought that would be something I could share with you.